Welcome to Carefree and Conscious, paranormal and profound authors with stunning true stories. If you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe. I'm your host, Susanne Wilson, the Carefree Medium and Intuition Educator. Today on Carefree and Conscious, You Will Never Die, The Evidence, with R. Craig Hogan, Ph.D. Craig Hogan literally wrote the book on the evidence that you will never die. In fact, he is a highly regarded and sought after educator and presenter at international conferences and on podcasts because of his expertise in research into not only writing about and researching afterlife information and communications, but also creating methods for direct communication and communication through psychotherapists. Craig has written many books, and you are going to hear about why he can tell you for a fact that you will never truly die. You will also hear about a very important resource called seekreality.com, where you can find all of the latest research on the afterlife. And now, Carefree and Conscious, you will never die. Craig Hogan, welcome to Carefree and Conscious.
It's a delight to be here with you. You know, I love talking with you, Suzanne, and I'm looking forward to today. We have lots of things to talk about.
And we have a long history of working together on the Afterlife Research and Education Institute. We used to run into each other at conferences even before that. And we've had lots of conversations, lots of email exchanges. And I think I know where you're coming from, but you take such a deep dive into all things afterlife that you're always coming up with some new area of research. And so I follow you, frankly. But I want to back up a second here and ask you, who is Craig Hogan and what led you to the afterlife research? There has to be a story that would get you in so very deeply.
Yeah, there is a story. It happened to me when I was half a century old, and I started having people come to me who were psychics and mediums. And I just met them, and it seemed like I didn't know why I was kept meeting them. And so one time I went to a psychic, and she said to me, well, you know, you have psychometry ability. You can hold things in your hand and you'll know what they are. And you'll know the history behind them. And so she said, take a deck of playing cards and put one card at a time on your palm face down. And if it feels like it's warm, it's red. If it feels like it's cold, it's black. And make piles out of them, and then don't look at them until after you've made a couple of piles. And so I did that. I made a couple of piles. I had about 25 cards in the piles. And when I turned over the cards that were supposed to be black because of the fact that they were cold, every one of them was black. And I turned over the pile that had reds in it, and it was supposed to be warm, and everyone except one was red. And so that taught me that there was something more going on here than what I normally would expect, because, you know, I've been in business. I had my own business writing school that's online, and all of these things that had nothing to do with spirituality. And so I had pretty well lost all of that. I was for a while a faculty member at Wheaton College, and I lost that faith that I had then. And so I had nothing. And so with this incident, that proved to me that there's much more to life than what we see in front of us. And so then I picked up a book, and it described how a person can do remote viewing. And so they said, well, you sit down in front of a monitor and you get to this website, and the website will give you a cue. It's going to be just letters or numbers, and it's not going to be meaningful. And you're then to remote view what's at that cue. What does that cue stand for? And so I did that. I sat down and did some remote viewing, and I brought up the cue, and I did the cue in my mind. And then after that, I looked at what it was, and I had sketched exactly what was there. So I can remote view. So I had discovered that there's much more to life than this tiny rock that we live on. and that I wanted to learn more about it. I wanted to know more about it, and so I started delving into it. And I went into Deepak Chopra and all of the others who were talking about metaphysical things. And after a while, I learned that, well, if all of these things are true and the mind is not in the brain, I can remote view things. That means the mind can keep on going once the body dies. And so then I started learning about the afterlife. And the more I learned, the more excited I became, because there's so much information now. We know so much more about the afterlife than people in any time have ever known. And so I delved into it. And the more I got into it, the more excited I got. And then after I got excited about it, I figured I ought to help other people to get excited about it. And so that's when I started on working to help other people understand that we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. We're going to continue to live after the body dies. And everyone needs to know that, and that will help them to live their lives differently. They'll be confident even at the end of their lives, and they will treat other people differently. So that's how I came down to where I am now. And it was so important that I devoted my life to helping other people to understand this, helping other people to learn this. And so that's when I formed the Afterlife Research and Education Institute. It's helping people to do this work. And I'm trying to get funding for people who are trying to do it. And get the word out to people. And then finally, seekreality.com. And seekreality.com is like a digest of all of the information we have today about the people who are living in the life after this life, their communications with us, why we know that we continue to live after the body dies. And that's what I've been devoting my life to now.
Well, I'll tell you, a good 5 or 6 years before we ever met, I emailed you. My mentor in mediumship had passed, and I had felt really sad and had gotten online and was looking at who's really working on this in a way I can relate to now, who's exploring the afterlife. And I found you, and I emailed you then, and you sent me back a very thoughtful, kind of lengthy email. And I couldn't even tell you the content now. That doesn't really matter. What mattered to me is that you cared and you actually had something constructive to say. It wasn't, clearly it wasn't a cut and paste response. And I thought, man, this guy keeps up this work like this, he's not going to have time to do this anymore. So I'm really glad that you have an online community at seekreality.com. I think we need that. I want to get into some hard stuff right away because these are the big questions that people really have. And that's, how do you know, and how does the afterlife research community know what it knows about what the afterlife is like?
The firmest evidence that we have of the fact that we continue to live after the body dies is in the statements by people living on this side of life who are communicating with their loved ones who are in the life after this life now. And they're communicating back to them, and they're telling them what life is like there. They're telling them that they are alive and well, and they're doing fine, and not to worry about them, and not to grieve because of the fact that they did not die. Their bodies died, but they are still there. And so then they communicate back to us, and the person on this side of life confirms it. That's the validation. And it can even be in recordings. We have recordings of people from the Leslie Flint archives. Leslie Flint was a medium in the 20th century who would sit in a room, and people would come through from the afterlife, and they would speak out loud in the room so that you could hear them. And now we have thousands of recordings of people speaking. And we have instances in which the people coming through in these recordings would say things to the person who loved them, who's sitting there with Leslie Flint, and they would tell them what they were doing that day, what they were doing the previous day, what they were thinking. And they would communicate with them using the same words and the same intonation. It was the person that the person on this side of life would say, yes, that absolutely is my loved one. We've been communicating. And so people would come through, and they would come in every 6 months or every 3 months, and they would sit down with Leslie Flint and have conversations with their loved one like they were speaking over the breakfast table. And so this is the evidence that we have that the life after this life is a reality, that we do not die. We continue to get these. And so then that was one medium, but there are other mediums in which we get it. We get it through the wonderful mental mediums like you. You're the most talented medium I know. And these mediums then tell us things about the life after this life. And we can rely upon them because we get corroboration. So we get that from all sorts of places, other mediums, and we get it from direct voice mediums, and we get it from mental mediums and physical mediums. And all of these things come down to a convergence to tell us we're going to continue to live after the body dies. The transition from this life into the next is very easy, very painless, and people don't even realize that it's happened. And they're just here one minute and then they're there the next. And so then they have wonderful stories to tell us about the life after this life. And these stories are accumulating more and more with mass media because of the fact that we can share these things. They come up and they go on YouTube and they go onto Facebook, and all of these stories are becoming prominent now. So we're understanding for the first time in humankind's history the realities of life after this life and the fact that we will continue to live after the body dies.
Well, what do you say to someone who says, I would rather it just be lights out when I die, because this life has been so difficult. I don't know if I signed up for this before I came, so there's that part of it, but I was stupid. And I get emails like this at least every month. Why can't I just have some rest when I pass? So there's two elements there. There's I don't want to keep going. I don't want to keep struggling after it's my time to go. And then there's, why would I sign up for all of this? And that's been a very common theme in the email and the IMs that I get since the COVID days and since all of the crazy things that are happening in the world. What would you say back to someone who wrote you something like that?
I would say to them that they have much to look forward to when they leave this life and go on to the next life, that what they're going through now is helping them to become the person that they will become, and that they eventually will overcome the challenges. They need help. We're in a primitive, backward period in humankind's history when people don't understand the fact that we are going to continue after the body dies. And so it's difficult for us at this time. We're actually going through this period of time, but we chose to be here. So we chose to come here now. All of these difficulties, all of these problems that we're going through are teaching us. We're growing, we're learning. And it's like the child who stands up against the side of the wall and they mark their heights as they grow. And we don't realize the fact that we're growing. We don't have that wall to stand up against to see, but we are growing spiritually. We're growing in love and compassion. We're growing in understanding of other people and what the life after this life is going to be like. And so we're growing in understanding. And in spite of the fact that this time is difficult, we chose to be in this crucible, in this period of time when life is difficult. In spite of the fact that this time is difficult, the society is not very supportive. It's not helping us to understand that this is only temporary, that we'll live on after this life. And so in spite of all of that, we can come through and we can be the victors. We can overcome the challenges that we're going through. And when we do that, then we'll come out of the other side looking back and with joy and saying, we did it. We managed to get through this. The difficulty now is that there's not much support to help people do it. And that's where we run into difficulty. The families are not supportive of helping people to go through their struggles. The institutions, the churches, none of these things are supportive. And so we're kind of making our own way during this period in our lives. We must not give up, and we must not feel like this is futile, that it's not going to result in anything, because it is. We're going to overcome these difficulties. All we have to do is go through it together. And then we need to help other people in the same way. It's not only us as an individual, but we need to help other people go through their struggles, because they're going through the same kinds of things. And if we help them, then they will help us, and other people will help each other. Eventually, humankind is going to learn that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, that we can help each other to go through these challenges. The difficulty is we chose to come into this crucible, into this period in Earth's history, when there are many difficulties and people are not helping each other to do this. But it is because we are going to be learning lessons, and all of it is going to be fruitful. And then we will have a wonderful, joyous reunion with our loved ones in the life after this life. We'll talk over the things that happened. It'll be a wonderful time, and we'll realize why we went through them, why we went through those struggles. The important thing is to stay with it, to realize the fact that we are an eternal being having a physical experience, and that it is all going to be to our benefit when we come out of the other end.
Well, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've got to ask you about the elephant in the room, and that's this concept of hell and external judgment, punishment, the idea that there may be some souls that are reluctant to go into the light upon physical death because they don't know what they're going to face. And as a medium, I can tell you there are those sitters that come to me and say, whatever you do, don't connect with so-and-so because they hurt me, but they're probably in hell. And so I make a mental note of that, but I can't always, I seldom actually can I stop a session and explain about my concept of hell. What is your concept of hell, and is it based on what mediums have brought through, or what other information do you have? Does it exist? Is there a devil? Let's talk about the real scary, bad, evil stuff that's in people's minds.
Yeah, they're meant to scare us. That was the purpose of them. Actually, in the first century, when the hell myth became prominent, those who were outside of the church, who were outside of the belief system, then said that these Christians were using this to keep people in line. And that was the purpose of it. It was developed by the early church in order to keep people in line and to give them some reason that they could come to the church and give them into the whatever it is that the church wanted from them. And usually it was money, but it's also support. And so then the church used that. They used the hell myth. The hell myth did not exist in the Hebrew Bible. It was something which was developed out of Zoroastrianism, and it came later. The idea of the devil came later. All of that came later. We don't see any signs of that in the earliest gospel, which is Mark. There's no sign of a hell. There's nothing about a hell. We don't see it in the earliest accounts of what the apostles were doing in the Acts of the Apostles. There is nothing about a hell there. There's nothing in the earliest writings by people who were out there helping other people understand Christ's message. And when Paul wrote, there was nothing in Paul's writings about a hell. The hell myth didn't develop until later. It was developed by the church. We know that. And the people from the life after this life, when they come through to us, they say, please don't believe the hell myth. It is a terrible fiction that has been put upon people in the earth. And you must not believe in it because of the fact that there is no hell. There's no judgment. There's no punishment. When we go on to the life after this life, we'll go through a life review in which we will understand what it is that happened from every other person's point of view as well as ours. We'll feel what the other people felt during our life when we go through the life review. And that then is going to teach us. It is not a punishment. It's meant to teach us. It's meant for us to grow. But within all of that, there is no one who judges or punishes us for what we did on the earth plane. And so then the hell myth is just a myth that we have to get rid of. It has to go away. Surprisingly, over 60% of the people who were surveyed in the Pew survey of the beliefs of the Christian church still believe in a hell, but they don't believe that they're going to be going there. They don't believe any of their friends are going to be going there. It's only Adolf Hitler and it's Idi Amin and it's the evil folks that are going to be going there. But what they don't realize is that the hell myth is something which was created by the church. It was promulgated from the church during the early centuries, and it is a myth that we have to eradicate because there is no hell, there is no judgment in the life after this life. We are going to continue to grow, so we will judge ourselves. We'll be looking at what happened during our lives, and we'll be saying, I could have done that differently. I should have done that differently. I understand now. I feel what that person felt. And so then we become a more rounded, a more understanding, a more sympathetic, a more compassionate person based upon our review of what happened during our time on earth. But there is no hell. We needn't worry about that.
Well, and hell comes up a lot with religious families who've had a loved one who has died by suicide. What do you say to that?
Yeah, there is no judgment of a person who has taken their own life. So what we know from the people who are in the life after this life coming back and telling us is that every person who takes their own life is met with great compassion, with understanding, with love, because they've been through so much. And so then the people who greet them in the life after this life and their family accept them. There is no judgment, there's no punishment, there is no such thing as hell. They're going to be understood. The difficult part is that they are then going to look back on their life and they're going to see what they missed. They're going to see what they could have had. They're going to see what their loved ones could have had. And they're going to experience the grief of the people who are still on the earth plane, because they're going to be getting that grief. They're going to understand it and feel it. And so it's not a delightful time, but it is a loving time when they go on to the life after this life. There is no condemnation. There is no punishment. We judge ourselves by growing spiritually, but we don't have to worry about someone doing something to us or sending us into hell as a result of taking our own life. But it is, we need to stand into the fray. We need to go into the challenges. And then when we understand them, when we got out to the other side of all of these challenges, then we'll look back with joy, with the fact that we did prevail over all of these things that were going on in our life. And then the people on the other side are applauding for us for doing that. They're very much on our side. They're helping us. They're giving us guidance. And if we can just open ourselves up to that guidance and look forward to having this wonderful life that we can have when we realize that we're eternal beings having a spiritual experience, then we will overcome the obstacles and we'll go on to the rest of our lives in joy and in peace as a result of it.
You know, this reminds me, there are a few readings for a medium where there's going to be some element that really stands out, and I'll write it in my diary, but I don't remember the whole session. I had a gentleman whose mother was my sitter, and he was coming in, and he very quickly said, you know, I'm sorry that I left. And so I knew that he had died by suicide. And then he was trying to get a point across to me. And, you know, we use a lot of symbols and images in mediumship. And he had this big slice of pizza and he put a bunch of it in his mouth, and then his cheeks were round and full and he was chew, chew, chew. And so not knowing what that meant, I was simply descriptive and told my sitter what I was seeing. Well, I don't know. I can't say that, you know, he would eat like that. And so finally it dawned on me, he's saying he bit off more than he could chew.
Mm-hmm.
And I got all three of my, you got it right, sister, symbols, the thumbs up, green light, the happy ding, ding, ding of a bell. And so that led me down this path of, I know we plan certain things, certain overall life themes that we want to have before we're born, items that we want to work on, experiences that we want to have. I don't think it's down to great detail from what I can tell, because we have free will all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But do some souls just, are they overachievers in their planning before they come? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that it's true. We know that suicide is not in the life's plan. That is not a part of it. It's what Susanne J said is free will gone awry. And what that means is that we will go into our life plan and we may choose to have difficulties. We may choose to be in circumstances that are going to be creating problems. We may have a mental disability such as bipolar. And so we choose to have that before we come in. And so then what we do with that then, though, during this lifetime, we should triumph over that. We should overcome that. We should learn with the help of the people around us. And so then we are going to come into the earth plane with those difficulties, with those problems that we might encounter. But we needn't go to that end, to the end of having to take our own life, to leave, exit early, because of the fact that we need to learn those lessons. We should be learning those lessons. And if we haven't been able to learn those lessons, then we will, in our life review, then we'll begin to learn them. Once we've gone on to the next life, we'll realize what we had done differently. But these lessons are important lessons. They're hard lessons that we have to learn. And we can learn them if we just stay with it and don't exit, don't leave this time in this life. But it is not in the life plan. And so it is something which is free will gone awry. a person can continue. Now, as far as the people who have something like Lewy body syndrome or Alzheimer's or another difficulty that they are not living through, they're not going to be getting better, they're getting worse. That's a different circumstance when they go on to the life after this life. And they're met with understanding because of the fact that they needed to do this. They felt like they needed to do this. But it is still a time when they wish that they could have stayed in and that they could have continued with their life, could have overcome the difficulties, could have learned the lessons that they wanted to learn. So it's important that we stay with this life as much as we can, even though we're run into all of these difficulties.
And I've heard this comment before. There was one time where I made a video that I have since taken down. It was a long time ago, and I felt like I was a little too cheerful about what the afterlife was like. And I wasn't even thinking of people wanting to leave physical earth early because the afterlife sounded so good. And I was doing a lot of very large events at the time and getting tons of attention on that particular video. You can't, you know, Craig, you can never know why a certain video goes viral and another one doesn't. But this one did, and people were asking me, well, why shouldn't I, and this is a quote, why shouldn't I off myself right now and get out of this hell on earth? And those words have stayed with me all these years. And I did take the video down, and now I try to always incorporate, you know, this is when you leave the earth at your rightful and natural time. What do you say to someone that says, hey, I can handle going over there and being angry with myself for a little bit because things are so bad here? Is that now a case for getting a psychiatrist or a counselor involved? And when do you personally know, as an educator, and when do you personally know how to handle an inquiry when somebody needs help versus when they need to know about the afterlife and research? What's your border?
Yeah, I've had the same experience when I've done videos about suicide and people don't, when you talk about the fact that they're met with understanding and with love and the other side, then you wonder whether others are going to say, well, you know, that's not so bad. You know, I don't like my life now. Maybe I'll just end it now. And so I struggle with that as well, and I end up focusing on the fact that it is not a joyous time when they commit suicide, when they take their own life, that this is not a time of wonderful reunions when everybody's so happy that they're there, and it is a time of sadness. They feel all the sadness from the people living in the life after this life and the people who are living on the earth plane. So they get all of that sadness, and so then that doesn't go away. It will happen for years. So we know that it's not a wonderful time when they do that. What I tell people is that they always need to look for resources. That's the difficulty. People don't look for resources.
That's
The
right.
resources are not as readily available as they should be. The churches should be involved in this. All of the social service agencies should be involved, but they're not so much available. But they need to look for the resources. In the activity of looking, they're going to be inspired by the people living in the life after this life who are always looking over them, their souls who are always looking for them, looking over them. And so then if they start to look for these resources and find them and engage in them, then their lives can be different. The problem is that people feel like they have to go through everything alone. That I'm in this alone. I'm doing this all by myself. I don't want people to know that I feel this way, and so I'm just going to keep it secret. And then after a long time, the burden becomes too great. But what they need to do is to look for the resources. The resources are out there. There are people who are compassionate, who are loving and are anxious to help. There are, my daughter is actually a social service agency manager, and she works with people on the phone to help them to overcome the difficulties that they're having so that they don't then take their own life. These agencies are available. They just have to look for them. And then we also have to make it available. We have to let people know that these agencies are there, that these opportunities are there for other people to speak with them. And so we have our own responsibility for those people. If they would just look, if they'll just try to find it, they will be given help in trying to find a way to overcome this difficulty and grow from it and come out of the other end much more a whole person, a wonderful, loving person that they would like to be in their lives. And all they have to do is work at the growth, and it will happen.
But I also think, keep in mind that there are those here on earth who their mission is to help others heal themselves. And so, like you say, the resources are there, but when we're curled up in a fetal position in bed and feel like we can't move, we're not going to pick up a phone and ask for help. And I think it's very important to have an awareness of your neighbors, the people around you, and be more of a community member. I was out of town, and my doorbell, I have one of those Ring doorbells. It was making a screeching noise, and you could barely hear it. You had to come right up to my doorbell. But a neighbor texted me and said, "Suzanne, are you okay? I just want to make sure you're okay. You're in there because your doorbell has a little screeching noise, and I know you fix things right away." And I was like, I picked up the phone and called her, like, "I'm so happy that you were looking out for me. I'm going to be back." And I thought, people don't do that anymore. We're in our silos, and we got more in our silos in the last 4 years. Sometimes, if we can just remember that we're all part of a unity consciousness, if we can all remember that living by the golden rule and doing unto others as you would have them do unto you, that make that part of ourselves, not because a church told us or a religion told us that that's the way to heaven, but because that's the way to lots of good things for everybody. I say to those who want to be more intuitive, the very first thing that you can do is be kind. Because when you're kind to others, it plugs you into the good matrix, the universal consciousness, and more gifts start coming your way. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about what heaven is really like and the afterlife communication, which this is the thing I'm most excited about, and I hope everybody stays for this. As you know, my mission is to teach as many people as possible that they actually don't need to go get readings. It's great at first, a few months after the loved one has passed, to sit with an evidential medium who can identify the spirit, give evidence that it's really them, and then give the message that they came to say. But then after that, I want to see people making their own direct connection. And you have a unique method that you teach that has to do with making your own direct connection. And I love that. But let's talk about what's going on in heaven. Are we interrupting them when we try to make the connection? I know we're not, from my own experience, but from your viewpoint, are we interrupting them? And then what is making that direct connection without a medium? What does that entail?
Yeah, and they're anxious for us to communicate with them. It is as though they had just moved to another country, and they want us to talk with them. They want us to phone them and talk with them there. They don't want us to give up on them like they're no longer around. So they're anxious for us to communicate with them, and they will communicate with us from wherever they are. So they may do it telepathically, mind to mind, from wherever they are, whatever they're doing at the time. They don't have to come onto the earth plane to communicate with us, but they may come into the earth plane and they may spend time with us in the earth plane. So it's up to them, whatever it is that they'd like to do, and they're anxious to communicate. So we should keep up the communication. When people describe what happens after the person has transitioned into the next life, people on this side of life say, well, I felt like they were around for the first few months, but after that, I just didn't feel like they were there. And it's because of the fact that they're not approaching, they're not coming back to spend time because they can't get through. It's frustrating for them. And so what we need to do is we need to learn how to communicate with them. And so I developed the self-guided afterlife connection procedure, and it's based upon my work. I've done work with psychotherapists, two psychotherapists who are doing psychotherapy work in which they help people to communicate with their loved ones while they're sitting in their office. and they're very successful. One of them is 98% successful, and they have extended conversations with them, and they walk with them and they talk with them in their mind, and they have a wonderful time of it. And so I realized after I'd written these 2 books that I could teach people how to do this, and they could do this on their own. And so I developed the self-guided afterlife connection procedure. It's at afterlifeinstitute.org/self-guided. And it teaches people how to just relax, to allow those messages to come through from the loved one who's living there. They will communicate, they will come to us. There's no need to worry about burdening them or giving them too much contact. You cannot give them enough contact. So it's important that you understand that you're not going to be interrupting them. That whatever they're doing, they will continue to do it, that they will come to you telepathically, but they will engage with you. And so I just want people to realize the fact that they can communicate with their loved one. Their loved one is anxious. They're ringing the bell, and all you have to do is pick up the phone and talk to them because they're anxious to talk to you. And so the people who have gone through it are very successful. 86% of the people have very good, wonderful afterlife communications with their loved ones living in the next life. And so it is something that anybody can do. And so then after they learn how to do this, they can sit in the doctor's office waiting to go in and just close their eyes and for a moment and have a conversation. And it's very easy to do, but people just have to learn how to do it. And so they're anxious for us to communicate. They want us to communicate. We are not holding them back. We're not taking up much of their time. And they want to hear from us. And so we should communicate with them. It's going to help them, but it's also going to help us. Because the more you do this, the more you realize that they're fine and you're going to be fine after you make the transition. And so there's no need to fear the end of this life. And there is going to be a wonderful reunion with them when we get to the next life. And we can have that conversation now. All we have to do is sit, relax, and go into the conversation, and they will correspond. They will come back to us.
I've seen several times in my own work that if the place is created mentally, if you say, let's meet in this physical place, and especially a place that both of you were in before, because it helps you create it in your mind and say, for example, we're going to meet on the back patio on the sofa, and here's the time and the date. And then every day you're concentrating on that area and the sounds, the sense, the feeling, and you mentally go there a few minutes before. There's that works, but people are expecting, oh, when I do this meditation, they should just walk into the room and I should see them like they just came in the door, and the expectations can be very, very high. My finding has been that if there's any contact, even if it's for a few seconds, you see them clearly in your mind's eye, you feel a touch or something like that, it really helps to celebrate that, be grateful for that, and then you can say, well, let's try again next time and see what else we can do. And that's really helpful. Now, would somebody have to make an appointment with a psychotherapist to use your method?
Yes, so they go through grief therapy, the normal grief therapy procedure. The psychotherapist using a method called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR. And it's a powerful method of helping people with trauma. It was originally used with combat veterans. And so then the psychotherapist would put them into a state of mind using EMDR. And during the time when they were in that state of mind, they would close their eyes. The psychotherapist is not leading them, doesn't tell them what's going to be happening. They just close their eyes and they have their own afterlife connection with the person for whom they're grieving. So it's during the grief process that it originates with grief therapy. Because in grief therapy, generally what people are doing who don't understand this, they're trying to help people to overcome their grief. To give up on the person who's gone on to the next life and live your life. That's the Freudian method of having grief therapy. And so then they'll come into a situation with a psychotherapist in which they're having this setting, and the psychotherapist puts them into a state of mind in which they have their own afterlife communication. And then they realize the fact that they are alive. They are there, and they're anxious to communicate. And so then in the self-guided afterlife connection procedure, what I do is then I put them into a state of mind in which they go to a place of great beauty. And this is a place that they can go to anytime. They just close their eyes and they go to the place of great beauty. And they remember what it's like. I take them through a narration in which I have them look around and see what's there and understand what that place is looking like. And once they can go there, then they can go there anytime. And they can sit and quietly someplace and go there. In the EMDR, the psychotherapist method, what they do is they allow the person in the afterlife to take over. So then they will guide the person into it. They will take over and bring to them the connection that they want, that they're having. And so then it's a different form of connection. It's it's a very viable connection. 98% of the people who get into it are able to have a connection. So these methods of communicating, all they're doing is putting people into a state of mind that they can go into themselves at any time. If we had grown up in this society, understanding the fact that our people who love us have gone on to the next life, it's just like they moved to a different country. We can phone them and we can talk to them. And if we had known that as children, if we had grown up knowing that that's true, it would be commonplace. People would do it normally. They would say that in a conversation, they would say, "Oh, I talked to grandma last night, and grandma told me not to worry about that problem I'm having with that boy." And then that would be a normal part of conversation. Everybody would have those conversations. It's only the fact that our society isn't teaching that. Our society doesn't understand that people are not doing that normally, but unusually. But when society understands that, when people are taught that, then it will be a normal, everyday conversation that people have. They will share that with other people, and they'll be able to have these communications. But for right now, we have the methods. The psychotherapists are able to do it with us. The self-guided afterlife connection procedure is able to do it. And so we have these methods that are available, and each one of us as individuals can engage in them, and we can have wonderful, extended conversations with our loved ones in life after this life.
I really like EMDR, and
Mhm.
it's important as a medium who is dealing with the pain of others, being the intermediary, that I have self-care. And for me, as soon as something comes up, I take it to a therapist for EMDR.
Mm.
And it has helped me in the past with my own traumas, and we all have them. And it works. It turns what is pain into data
Mhm.
so that you can move forward with love in your heart and a sense of empowerment instead. So, I've recorded MP3s to help people make a direct connection with loved ones in spirit. And there are those who the grief is complicated, or there is a prolonged grief because of other things that have happened. And that's not going to work for them right now. They need that therapist. They need that forward thinking grief therapist who can, instead of the traditional model of, I'm going to help you release them and let them go,
Mhm.
I'm going to help you know that they're still here. And I think it's an amazing thing. I hope that more therapists will consider becoming trained in it. How would they do that?
Yeah, they can become trained in the EMDR procedure through the EMDR Association. And if they Google just EMDR, then it will come up with the association to learn about how to extend that. Because when you go into an afterlife communication, it is an extension of EMDR. Rochelle Wright, who was a pioneer in using EMDR in afterlife communication, lets the person in the afterlife take over. So the EMDR normally is when the psychotherapist is going through it, and they're deciding what happens, and they're helping people to go into the state of mind in which they understand their trauma. As you say, they have the feeling like they've read it in a newspaper afterwards. It's not something which was personally offensive to them. But when the psychotherapist uses Rochelle Wright's method, they put them into a state of mind in which the person in the afterlife can take over. They then will guide. They then will make the decisions. They will go through the procedure. And when they do that, then they have wonderful afterlife communications. and they're exciting. They're much further than EMDR. They're much beyond EMDR because of the fact that the person in the afterlife is the person who's guiding what happens. And so it's an extended method. It is a wonderful method. They can go to, it's called Repair and Reattachment Grief Therapy. So they can go to repairandreattachment.com, and there they can find psychotherapists who live in their area. The other method that I co-authored a book about is induced after-death communication with Dr. Alan Botkin, and they can go to induced-adc.com, and they can find psychotherapists who are doing that procedure as well. So these procedures are available to people, and they can go online and get into the self-guided afterlife communication method as well. Procedures are available. We can help people to have their own communications. They just have to avail themselves of it. They have to become engaged in it. And if they do, they will find a way of communicating with their loved one. We can do it now. There's definite success in doing it. So anyone can do it. It's just a matter of finding the right procedure and being open to it.
Well, that's very helpful, hopeful, and healing to hear. Now, what do you see in the future? What's coming down the road in the near future in terms of breakthroughs or a shift in consciousness for all of us in humanity, if we should decide to take that opportunity for a shift? What's the next big potential in your mind?
There are wonderful things that are happening now. This is the first time in humankind's history when we've really understood the afterlife and afterlife communication. And we're seeing shifts in the population. The shifts are coming from the grassroots. In other words, it's people who are going through this experience. They're communicating. They're on Facebook. They're on YouTube. They're getting the communications about these methods of afterlife communication. And as a result of that, then they're learning, the grassroots, the people are learning. And eventually then it's going to affect the media, and it's going to affect the sciences and so forth, but it's going to come from the bottom up. And we're seeing that happen now, and it's accelerating at a tremendous rate. And so I expect that within the next decades, we will see that people generally will understand the fact that they are going to live after the body dies, that their loved ones are fine, that they're available to communicate. And all of these things are going to become commonplace in the next few decades. And so then I expect that there will be a shift then. We'll see a shift in consciousness as a result of that, because consciousness, we are all part of our universal intelligence. And so then our universal intelligence is what is becoming much more conscious of the life after this life. And that then will shift. There will be a change in the world as a result of it. There'll be a change in societies and in countries. And we will see that there will be changes that are going to result in greater peace, love, and joy among all people. And I think that it's going to happen within the next few decades. And so I expect that even science is going to, by the end of the century, is going to come to the point of view of understanding that the science is limited in what it understands about life, because it only looks at matter, and matter is just the scenery that's not the play. And so then they're going to realize that there's a play going on within that scenery, and then they're going to change as well. And I would expect that by the end of this century.
Well, that's very hopeful. I'll tell you, it can't come soon enough, right?
Mhm.
Well, I also hear from a lot of people who they know that I love animals and that my best friend is my dog. And Baron, short for Baron von Blessings, I had to help him cross over last summer at the ripe old age of just 8. There was nothing that could be done. There were plenty of signs that it was his time to go, which I'll talk about sometime. And immediately I was hearing from 2 camps of people. One, well, you can call him in and connect with him anytime you want because you're a medium, you know how to do this. And the second was, it's a shame he won't be on the other side when you get there because dogs don't have souls. And so I hearkened back to when I was standing with my granddad, the preacher, after his sermon at church. I was a little girl, probably 8 or 9 years old, and holding his hand, and the people were leaving, and they're shaking the pastor's hand. And one of the gentlemen said, Reverend, my dog died. Will he be there in heaven when I get there? And my granddad, without missing a beat, said, well, would it be heaven without your dog? And everybody just smiled and moved forward. What do you say to people that are worried that animals will not be there for them? I know you love kitty cats.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a feral colony manager, so I take care of the wild kitties in the area. And of course, I've had dogs as well, and I've had all manner of pets during my lifetime. Our pets are there. They're waiting for us. They're with people who love them, are loving them and caring for them now in the life after this life. And we then are going to have a wonderful reunion with them. They're going to be jumping up on us and licking our face, and we're going to have that wonderful time with them. They are available to communicate, so they can communicate with us. They may communicate in feelings rather than in words, but I've also heard accounts in which they've communicated in words. We do know that from the people who are describing life in the afterlife. One is Anthony Borgia's book, Life in the World Unseen. And in Anthony Borgia's book, he has a description of a man who actually had a conversation during the period of time in the book in which he had spoken with a cat who had been there in the afterlife. And so we know that they can communicate, and they can communicate with us now. So they're going to be there looking forward to all of those people that we love, all those pets that we love. Anyone that we love is going to be there in the life after this life. And that includes even infants that are not carried to term. That if they are loved by the mother, then they will be there. They have been born in the life after this life, and they grow up there. And there is a wonderful reunion when the people get there to have that time with them. So anyone whom we love, any pet that we love, is going to be there when we arrive there, and they're going to be among the first to greet us when we get there.
I can't wait for that day. In fact, that's who I want to see first is Baron. He actually was a reincarnation of a pet that I had before, and I dreamed that pet was coming back. And the next day I went online and looked for a breeder because I've had rescues before, and I'm getting a little older, and I was like, ugh, I don't know if I can handle all of the issues that come with a rescue. And I had texted the breeder and said, do you have black and silver miniature schnauzer? Because that's what came to me in the dream. Marley's coming back. This is what she looks like. She's a boy, and you'll call him Baron von Blessings. He's the Baron of Blessings, basically, is what they said. And I'm like, well, it's a German animal. I'll make it Baron von Blessings. So I'm texting this breeder saying, do you have any dogs like this? And she texts back, call me tomorrow. I'll let you know. And so I thought, that's odd. And the next morning she texted me and said, we have a litter of 6 and there's 1. And they were born that day that I texted her. And sure enough, he had all the mannerisms that she had. And he came for a specific reason. He helped me get through a lot of things in life that would happen in a very compressed period of several years. And when his work was done, his body was done. And it doesn't make it any less painful because our bonds are so, so close. But I hear from him every once in a while, and he'll come in with one sharp, loud bark right in my face. And I'm not the only one that has heard the loud, sharp bark. So it's not because I'm a medium, it's because he's just that powerful with his love. But I'll tell you another thing. I had a gentleman who came to see me, and he was like very, very buffed, big guy. He was wearing a tank top and huge muscles, shaved head, very strong. He came in a motorcycle, and I was bringing through all of his parents and family members and all of that. And then I looked at him and I said, there's a very large spirit snake around your neck, just looped around your neck. And he just started crying with relief. and said, yes, 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 that's why I came here today. I wanted to connect with my snake.
Mm.
And it was so beautiful. And so I know that it's a different kind of grief, it's a different kind of healing, and they connect with us in different ways. They'll send us a sign or a symbol, sure, but they'll also send us little pictures, or they'll, try to cuddle, or you'll feel them or hear them,
Mhm.
things like that. I think the key with the pets is don't listen to what anybody says about who has a soul, who doesn't have a soul. Who are we to judge, right?
Mhm. Yeah, it's absolutely true because they do have a soul because we love them. And so then they are there. It is the pet that we realize that we know when we get there, we know it's the actual pet. It's the loved one that we loved when they were on Earth, and so then they have a soul, and because of the fact that we love them, and so that we can expect that they're going to be there, and we are going to have a wonderful reunion with them.
So you've given us a lot to ponder here, and we're coming to the end of our time. Would you like to leave us with just a final thought that we can take with us today?
Yeah, the important thing is to realize that we will come to the end of this life, but we will never die, and that we can look forward to the life after this life, that we can communicate with our loved ones who are living there now. And all we have to do is pick up the phone and call. All we have to do is use the methods that are available, and we can communicate with them. And so then we need to continue with the difficulties, with the problems that we're having in the crucible of earth that we're in now, realizing the fact that this will all end eventually, that we will come out triumphant if we just follow through and meet the challenges, and that we are going to have a wonderful time with our loved ones when we arrive in the next life, and we are with them for the rest of our lives in eternity.
Greg Hogan, thank you.
Visit our website, carefreemedium.com, or find us on social media at Carefree Medium. Thanks for supporting Carefree and Conscious.